Oh, boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. How people love talking about boundaries. It is sort of it feels like it's the whiteout of relationships. You just make things disappear. But some people will set a boundary and be really mean while they set a boundary. And a lot of people, actually, when they set a boundary, will be pretty mean when they set a boundary. Does setting a boundary mean that you need to be mean? Let's break that down. So while you're thinking about that, my question about boundaries there, I am going to take a second here to speak out to any therapists, coaches, or therapists in training who might be watching. I am launching a program in January of next year, 2024, that will be focusing on how to support clients who are healing from narcissistic relationships. See the link in the video description. So let's go talk about this idea of boundaries. Boundaries, okay? It's everybody's favorite kind of topic. And I actually think it's a bit of a third rail issue when it comes to navigating narcissistic relationships. It seems so nice and easy. Just set a boundary. Or maybe I need better boundaries. Or maybe this happened because you didn't set a boundary. Or people who can't set boundaries are codependent. Boundaries, 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 right? It's a thing. And it comes up a lot for people who are in narcissistic relationships. There's a certain sort of axiomatic assumption that people who are able to set boundaries are mentally healthier, stronger, have more self-confidence, more self-esteem, that people who can set boundaries value themselves and value their own time more, that they don't let people take advantage of them. Let me share with you a few recent boundary stories of my own. These by themselves don't mean much. But when I combined them with what I do in the world of understanding narcissistic relationships, it actually became an interesting reckoning of sorts and thinking about boundaries and personality and all of that. So in this first story here, I had made a professional request of someone. And when I make these requests in my professional roles, I expect the answer no 50% of the time. So if I need 10 people to do something, I ask 20. Listen, I once needed 2 journal reviewers for an article, and I had to ask 56 people before I got 2 yeses, and in the process got some pretty nasty emails too. But in this more recent example, I asked someone something very nicely. And I said, hey, listen, I know you're super busy, and I totally understand if you can't do that. I, being the sort of trauma-bonded person that I am, I always give people out from the very beginning. I don't want people to feel any pressure. I am a survivor of this narcissistic BS in all of its forms, so making my needs known is really very difficult for me. I avoid it. I try and do everything myself. But there are some things we cannot do for ourselves, so sometimes we have to ask for help. We have to ask for a favor. And it's very difficult for many of us who are survivors of these relationships. I asked this person the favor once. They never responded. That's normal in this world of people getting too many emails. I asked them again, and I even said, oh, I'm so sorry. Maybe you didn't get my original email. And they responded with a very curt, basically, I don't have time for this. I was kind of taken aback. I wasn't surprised they didn't want to do it. Everyone's busy. This person's very busy. That's cool. But it could have been a slightly warmer, hey, listen, I'm not going to be able to do this because it's fall semester, but I hope it goes well for you and thanks for reaching out. That's still a no, right? Something like that. There was not even a need for someone to apologize. They didn't do anything wrong. Saying no to me is not doing something wrong. But something along the lines of say, hey, I can't, and then throw somebody a little bone. Like the request I was making was a little bit vulnerable. But no, basically, that person was saying, lady, I ain't got no time for you, and please leave me the hell alone. Listen, I care more about understanding personality than I do boundaries. And when I experienced this, and I've been through things like this before, but just this happened recently, I thought, this isn't cool. It didn't feel good. Now, keep in mind, I made the same request to many, many other people, much busier than this person. And many said no, but in a normal way. They said things like, hey, sorry, I'm finishing a book. Please give Dr. Ramana my best regards. Someone else said, I'm sick. I can't do it. I'm recovering, but good luck. The yes wasn't the point. The others who said no, they also set a boundary, didn't they? And making this a bit more complex for me, and I think for many survivors of narcissistic relationships, is that even mustering up the energy to make a need known almost feels like a sheer impossibility. I must have sat on doing these emails for days. So then when I do go out on that branch and ask for that need to be met, and it's met with an abrupt clap back, I know I'm not alone amongst survivors when it turns me off the whole need asking thing for a while. I actually sent the emails almost like I was jumping at a cold pool. I'm like, I'm just doing this. I also know it's a me thing. I have to take responsibility for my needs. But that is a very academic and clinical and analytic way to think about it. Many survivors feel an overwhelming discomfort in their bodies when they have to express a need, and that discomfort gets set like concrete. When boundaries are set and then received in this abrupt manner, when boundaries are set or communicated in this abrupt manner, it becomes less about the boundary and more about the personality. I talked with other people about what happened to me, and interestingly, the jury was a little split. Obviously, people who cared about me didn't think it was nice, but when I asked objective folks who really didn't have as much skin in the game and didn't care as much about me per se, I got a little bit of, well, this is a busy person, and maybe they just typed it on their phone when they were at a red light. I wasn't buying it. But the entire experience reminded me that this boundary experience is layered and nuanced. There was a thinking, intellectual, cognitive, self-protective part of my brain that took a screw you stance. You didn't have to be so dismissive and I'm not going to ever collaborate with you kind of stance. But there was also a somatic, emotional, primal part of me that said, don't have needs. And if you ask, you will always be left alone, or your needs are ridiculous and they're not worth someone's time. That voice tends to win with me. I do believe that we can set boundaries with other people in a manner that's respectful and compassionate. When we set our boundaries, we can also think about context. We can recognize what was being asked, but we can also recognize that we want a longer-term relationship with someone. In this case, I didn't know the person very well. Clearly, either this is who this person is, in which case, no thanks, no need. Or it may be that this person actually really doesn't like me, and this was her way of saying that. So perhaps it was less about boundary and more about take the hint. Either way, didn't know this person, don't really need to know this person. But it's not easy, and I sadly say that my experience in setting boundaries has been that healthy people hear it and honor it, and unhealthy people will rage at you either overtly aggressively or passive aggressively. In fact, setting a boundary is actually a fantastic way to test the health of a relationship. If the boundary setting is done in a manner that's compassionate, it works. But here, this is when I hear the pushback from the folks out there in the internet jungle who say, why do I need to be nice about my boundary? I am just setting a boundary. Are you expecting me to do the emotional labor of the relationship? Why can't I just say no? At that point, you just got to be clear on the types of people you're able to tolerate. Personally, I don't like abrupt people. I don't like them. It's a preference. And once you live as long as I have, I don't think you need to play with all of the kids in the sandbox. So, when it comes to boundaries, we are either setting them or we're on the receiving side of them, right? And they aren't all created the same. But this is a narcissism channel, right? And all this talk of abrupt boundary setting takes us to, yep, the narcissistic folks. That's where all these damn videos end up, right? Narcissistic people are interesting. They're really good at setting boundaries. Just great. They will always say no when something doesn't work for them. Every single damn time. And yes, they can be very abrupt about how they set boundaries. And they'll often frame it as, I just call things the way I see them. I can't waste time with all of these niceties. Grow up. Sometimes people say no. Do I really need to be responsible for your damned feelings too? And I actually think that narcissistic people are so successful because they're so good at the word no when something doesn't work for them. They save themselves thousands of hours by not being and doing for other people. Being unempathic and entitled makes a person very efficient and very good at boundaries. Now, they may be good at setting boundaries, but they sure as hell are not good at honoring other people's boundaries. And they will say and do inappropriate things all the time. They will comment on your weight, your appearance, your life choices. They'll show up to an event you didn't invite them to. And they are entitled enough to believe they can do these things, and it's wrong to even call them out. However, if for any reason you were to violate the boundaries of a narcissistic person or try to set a boundary with them, hold on to your hat, because it would be gaslighting and meanness and cruelty and victimhood and silent treatment all the way down. I think we have tried to simplify this boundary conversation to tremendous detriment. We miss that it's not as simple as setting them, but setting them empathically and still recognizing that it will be comfortable. We miss that when someone sets a boundary with us, sometimes we may be bummed out, but it's okay when the person's human and empathic, whereas an abrupt and dismissive boundary feels awful and dismissive. And above all else, when it comes to boundaries, the narcissistic people will always do what works for them, only them. When people experiencing narcissistic abuse try to set boundaries, invariably it does not work out. All of their fears about what will happen if they express a need all play out. If you do express a need to or set a boundary with a narcissistic person, you're either gaslighted, or the enablers will tell you you're being uppity, or you're worried that people will leave you or disengage if you try it. And they very well may. That combination of stuff on top of the effects of trauma bonding on our psyches means that the guidance around boundary setting is really tough. So the next time someone tells you, oh, maybe you're the problem, maybe you don't know how to set boundaries or how to express your needs, you may want to polish up that gray rock and disengage. Because in that I'd tell you two different tales about boundaries. Another time I tried to set boundaries. It took me a lot, but I finally had to say to someone that, that something they said to me hurt me. And that was that. And that was all it was. And the person wanted nothing further to do with me. My experiences with boundaries haven't been great. When I muster up that courage, it almost always falls apart. So I think, and I'm not even saying in all these cases it didn't work. I don't know if these people were narcissistic. But I think that the idea that the boundary is the grand panacea of our time is risky. And when it doesn't work, people, especially people with histories of trauma bonding and narcissistic relationships, tend to blame themselves. But if you are going to set a boundary, just try to be nice about it. Thanks again.